Ladies and gentlemen, in this Gaming.com video, we're going to be discussing the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One's life cycle, as well as sales figures in the eyes and minds of AMD, who are of course instrumental in the creation of both consoles. AMD, of course, are the ones who are producing the chips inside both the PS4 and Xbox One, and they have gone on record, specifically the CTO, Devinder Kumar, as well as Dr. Lisa Su, who is of course the CEO over at AMD, on their thoughts of the performance of the next generation systems and how they feel that they're going to sell, but also how much longer we're going to be seeing them as the current systems, as the, I guess you could say, before the PS5 and the Xbox 2, or whatever the hell it ends up being called, hits the shelves. So I'm going to read out a few quotes. The first one is from Devinder Kumar, and this is a transcript. Credit is Seeking Alpha. So if you count 2013 by 13, 14, 15, we're about to enter 16. If you go past years and look, and if you say it's a 7-year cycle, then 16 is right in the middle. And then he goes on to point out various issues about the PlayStation 4, about the ramp up of production, and then he says, that's why I said earlier we expect units overall in this generation of consoles to being higher in 16 than 15, which is, in my opinion, fairly accurate. I mean, the first year of the system's lives, up until like mid to late 2014, it's fair to say that there wasn't that many killer applications on either system. There were some pretty good games on both. For example, Infamous Second Son, in my opinion, but on the PS4, but it wasn't really essential that you buy either system, and that's the same for any next generation system. The first year, you know, it's okay, but it's not really essential to buy it. But as the years progress, the Xbox 360 and the PS3 in this case, less and less games are being produced on it, so it becomes more and more important to own the latest and greatest system. But Dr. Lisa Su continues. She says that I think the gaming console cycle is usually between 5 to 7 years. On the longer side, this cycle has been really good. I think it's been really good for both Sony and Microsoft, have really marketed well through the value proposition. The peak of the games consoles is probably anywhere from the 3rd to 4th year. We believe this year the games console units are relative to last year. From our visibility, next year will be up over the relative this year, and it's really good about continuing to satisfy that amidst is higher for more gaming. So I view it as a continued good market for AMD, and once again, a transcript was from Seeking Alpha. So in short, AMD believe that by 2016 we're going to be over halfway through both the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4's life cycle, assuming they do end up to 2017. Now do bear in mind there have been other rumours which indicate that AMD are planning to provide chips for the next generation of systems in 2018. Now obviously these are undisclosed sources, so how much salt you want to put with that truck is completely and utterly down to you. But if you do believe that next generation consoles are going to have about 5 times performance per watt and will naturally be focused on virtual reality, which isn't really a surprise to anyone. So what does that really mean? Well, does it tie in? I think so. I mean, from what we're seeing here, from what AMD have told us, from what Microsoft have told us, from what Sony have told us, and evidently even Nintendo themselves, and by Nintendo obviously they've not really said, yes, this is when we're launching the NX, but all signs and indications are some point 2016, maybe 17, it makes sense for Microsoft and of course Sony to be thinking the same thing. So there are a couple of reasons I personally believe that 17 will be the last really big year of the systems, and then 2017, potentially 18, we're going to see the PS5 and co introduced. First of all, performance. Performance matters, and I don't blame Sony or Microsoft for releasing in 2013, but as I've said a couple of times now, really it was kind of like they had no choice. developers were struggling to get any more performance out of the Xbox 360 or PS3. They didn't have the RAM, they didn't have the GPU resources, so they couldn't push them anymore. There was just no way that they could run some of the games that were released on the next generation systems. It was just impossible. Developers were begging them for more. Unfortunately, because of the recession, and we all know that it hit a lot of people rather hard, and the fact that, to be honest with you, in 2012, 13 and 14, the introduction of hardware wasn't that great, and this is for numerous reasons. Die shrinks obviously haven't happened yet. They're really going to come to be the norm, and I mean like 14 and 16 nm by, say, mid next year. Most products will be on that die size. Plus, HBM hadn't been the norm at that point. GDDR5, we didn't have chips that were the 1 gigabyte. They were only 512, and they were hard to produce at decent clock speeds. So, and that's one of the reasons that Microsoft used DDR3, by the way, and the fact that even the PS4 was only going to have 4 gigabytes of memory. My point being that when the systems were being designed, they had problems, because yes, everyone knows that they could have put in the equivalent of a 7970 GPU. They could have done it, but it would have been expensive, really expensive, and they just, who's going to buy an £800 console? It's just not going to happen. You make a system that's like £800, $1,000. Of course, you will get the diehards that purchase it, but it's not really going to be large enough to make it worth it financially. Second reason I think that 2017, because if Nintendo do start introducing the NX in around 2016-17, Nintendo will have a pretty large performance benefit over the current generation systems, at least in theory, unless they do a complete and utter idiotic move. And the NX, from what we've heard, is really powerful. Based on developers' commentary, they've said that it's really powerful. How much I believe that, I don't really know, but let's suppose that it is true. No one, in other words, Microsoft and Sony, are going to want Nintendo to have a system that's like 2 or 3 times, or whatever it is, more powerful than what they've got, because it's just not good. Because obviously it means that developers are probably going to be swayed over to Nintendo's system, and it means that people are going to sell the PS4 and Xbox One for games which are on all systems. Once again, this is all assuming Nintendo don't absolutely royally fuck up, really upset third-party developers and all that stuff, but assuming they don't do that, which is an assumption at best, it's going to be a bit of an issue. The next reason I believe it is because 1080p screens are common now, but 4K is going to be absolutely the normal. And the PlayStation 4, don't like it, it's too bad. It just doesn't have enough power, raw performance and GPU to run virtual reality with extremely complex games. You can do it, there are techniques which do increase the frame rate, but essentially to run at high resolutions with the frame rate you really need for virtual reality, and Sony have admitted this, you quite simply need to reduce the complexity of your scene. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. That means that we won't be seeing the equivalent of the most complex PS4 games on virtual reality. Most likely we're going to be seeing simpler games, and that doesn't mean that they won't be fun, doesn't mean that PlayStation VR won't be good, but it just means that there's always going to be that nagging thought in people's minds. So, in my opinion, I think we're going to start hearing rumours of the next consoles by some point 2016, and I think 17 or 18 is going to be when they're introduced. I personally think 2017 is a bit early. The reason I feel that is because we're almost in 2016 right now. I think that the technology won't be cheap enough in 2016-17 to be, so HBM or GDDR, whatever it is, or whatever other chips and whatever else we see in that era. I don't think it's going to be cheap enough for consoles for the £300 to £400 range. I think it's going to be a year later when we see more die shrinks, when we see higher yields, when we see that, you know, APUs have become more refined, and we see new memory technologies have improved and performance is up high enough where even a low-end GPU equivalently will be considerably better than what's in the current systems. And that's all there is really to it. I believe, yes, 2018 is when we're going to see the next consoles. Microsoft have said, they've told us straight that they will release a next console. And I'm not saying that cloud won't be part and parcel of these systems, it probably will be, but to what degree I honestly don't know. But I don't think they're going to want to do as a service just yet. And the reason I feel that is because, honestly, it's dangerous from the perspective of Microsoft and Sony. Because let's be honest with each other, the real power Microsoft and Sony have is the fact that they're basically providing customers a means to play games from Ubisoft. Essentially, if all they do is offer it as like a cloud-based service, what's to stop EA expanding the Origin further? So all it is a little dongle, and you just plug that into your TV, and then you'll access your games via broadband, and that's like $5.99 a month. And the same thing for Ubisoft. Or a company, let's say your ISP, starts doing on-demand gaming, and they offer all the games you want for $20 a month, or something like that. Obviously, I'm just giving examples, but it's really dangerous for Sony and Microsoft to start pushing towards that direction. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, and it makes it even more of a problem for Sony, because at least with Microsoft they can start arguing that yes, it's good for PC and PC tie-ins and hardware. It's not ideal by any stretch of the imagination, but it works kind of with their Windows infrastructure and Windows Azure. With Sony, it doesn't benefit them at all. It just doesn't. And, you know, the PlayStation brand's great, but, you know, exclusivity-wise, it's not good for them. Because the big companies like Ubisoft, the big companies like EA, and even the smaller studios, they can just go with anyone. Let's say that you're a small indie developer and that you need a way to, you know, stream your game. Let's say, for the sake of argument, you produce, let's say, the next Amnesia game or something like that, and you're not big enough to, you know, handle the streaming yourself. It's not really, they could go to anyone. They could go to Bob's Game Streaming and it's fine. So obviously I'm vastly simplifying the situation here, but I feel that consoles as they are is going to be around for some time. And I feel that the next generation, probably the PS5 or the Xbox 2 or whatever they end up being called, is going to be an evolution of the technology we've got now. It's going to be a case where the systems are focused on the future. Whether that future is virtual reality, whether that future is 3D TVs, whether that future is 4K, whether that future is smell-o-vision, it's just too difficult to predict. But honestly, I think the PS4 and the Xbox One would have had a pretty good run by then. I think the Xbox 360 and PS3 were great systems, but I think towards the end they were kind of outstaying their welcome. They'd gone to the point where no one actually really felt like they'd seen anything new graphically, where worlds were becoming a bit constrained, where you just wondered so many times, I wonder what would have happened if Dark Souls 2 had been released on, you know, the next generation systems from the ground up, or I wonder what they could have done with X. You know, there was always that problem where the amount of memory they had was limited, or the amount of GPU performance they had was limited, or what have you. And it just, you could just tell that they were pretty much scraping the barrel of the tricks they had left with these systems. With that said, it is expensive to market a next generation system, and obviously cost is a problem, because it's not just Microsoft and Sony that have to worry, it's also the companies like Ubisoft, like EA, because there are development tools, artists have to learn them, programmers have to actually learn how to program and learn how to get the best tricks out of the system. They have to update their development tools, they have to actually update the studio, they have to spend time to actually learn how to develop for these things. And it is easier with an x86 architecture, because essentially all they are is PCs kind of restricted, but essentially the architecture is PC-like, unless you're going really into depth for the system, you know, if you're really pushing it. But if you're producing simpler games, it's considerably easier now. It's just one of those things. So I feel that that's the other kind of big deal. Honestly, I think though, a couple of years at max, and we'll start hearing a lot of rumours about the next generation systems, and that's absolutely fine with me. What I would really like, to be honest, is for an upgradable solution with the current systems. Personally, and this is off topic, I would have liked an option like the Sega Saturn had with the memory card solution, like the N64 had, like even the Genesis had, where you had the I think it's the virtual reality processor, or even the SNES, of course, with its own Super FX chip, or FX2 for that matter, where it was a small upgrade for the system. It allowed it to produce more, push more polygons, or more textures, or more whatever, better level of detail. And that would have, in my opinion, been a fairly decent way to have gone with these systems. You know, a small little crevice. The only problem is, obviously, it's hard to argue with customers and say, yeah, you need to purchase this. And that's the reason I don't feel that the rumours about the more powerful PlayStation 4 are going to really happen. At the end of the day, you can argue that a slimline PS4, yeah, there's no difference. It doesn't play games faster. It doesn't play with higher resolution. It doesn't play with higher frame rates. It doesn't make the game look better or play better. There's no difference. It's still a PlayStation 4. It might have a larger hard drive, but you can swap out the hard drive. It might have a smaller chassis, but who cares, right? Ultimately, it probably won't impact you. A more powerful PS4, that will impact you, and it would piss off some customers. I don't think everyone would be that upset, but some people would be, and it's really hard to tell someone who doesn't know much about systems, particularly when the main benefit of a console is that everything plays the same, that your PS4 is not equal to John's PS4. Now, once again, to go back just for a second, if it was an upgrade cart solution, I think it would be less of a big deal, because mentally people can say, well, I can upgrade my system for $50. Or I can upgrade my system, all I have to do, let's say for the sake of argument, Microsoft release an upgrade cart with the Gears of War 4, so obviously this is not going to happen, but let's just say it did. They could do two versions, the special edition which comes with the upgrade cart and the normal version which doesn't. Therefore, if you don't buy the upgrade cart, you're not going to have the high resolution graphics, maybe you won't be able to play with like as good level of detail, maybe the textures will be lower, or games are released with it and without it. So if you already own it, absolutely great. You don't need to buy it with it. But the first, but if you do own it, you don't need to buy it. If you don't own it, you've got the option, it'll be a bit cheaper. And that's just one way they could have gone, but obviously they didn't. The systems are what they are, so I think at this point, we won't be seeing a re-release of the PS4, the Xbox One with more powerful GPUs or whatever. I think instead, they're just going to save the development money, and we're going to be seeing the PS5 and Xbox One. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.